Why do we need oxygen? Of course we need.
Just for people in the room to know,
still have an impact.
A slight increase in global surface temperatures, which is exactly what we're experiencing, is actually on net a positive for humanity.
Why are you turning your back on the Indian community, man?
The number one attribute that our current U.S. immigration selects for is your willingness to lie.
You staying at home will hand the keys to the kingdom to someone that will destroy this country. And so if you actually had the objections and that wasn't some prepared speech that someone gave you, which one is which?
Well, it depends when we're looking at the ultrasound, because I would note it as a fetus rather than a baby.
Welcome back to Rattlesnake TV, guys. In this video, we are going to be watching Vivek Ramaswamy take some objections from some college liberals. And as per usual, he handles them fantastically and makes some great points as well. So with that, let's get into it.
Thank you guys for coming. I wanted to ask you guys about climate change today. So in my opinion, it is the most important issue of our time. And I'll start by saying that research shows that Earth does not have long, but that would be America too. A recent study by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change found that we only have about a decade to turn things around before we go over.
I know they said that 30 years ago.
A critical threshold. This is what scientists are saying. So
They've never been wrong. Just wear the mask in the shower, right? Yeah.
Trump says, drill, baby, drill. Harris supported the Green New Deal and helped pass the Inflation Reduction Act. Why is Trump's opinion better on this issue?
So I'll tell you why. I think climate change does not rank as a top 100 issue for Americans today. I think, and here's why. Here's why. Before I get into actually just a little bit of history here, I'm in a little bit of a historical mood today. Charlie said they've been saying that for 30 years, and that's right, that we only have another 10 years left. Actually, it's a little longer than that, Charlie. It goes back to the 1970s. So if you pull up the cover of Newsweek or Time magazine, back in the day, they used to have these things called magazines that were like paper copies of things they mailed to people's homes. But, you know, I was alive when that happened. They had these Newsweek and Time magazines they would mail to your home. On the cover of it was warning of the effects of global climate change. Unless we stop burning fossil fuels, we're actually going to have not global warming, but an ice age. That's what scientists, as recently as the 1970s, were worried about. What they realized was that actually they started tracking these global surface temperatures, and they weren't really going down. We're not on our way to that ice age. At which point they just changed their mind and said, oh, actually the real problem isn't the global ice age. No, it's actually the other thing, because temperatures are going up a little bit. Let's call it global warming. Now, there were a few years through 2012, about a 5-year streak where temperatures came down. They still didn't change that strand. So now what are the actual facts we have? I don't care about what somebody calling themselves a scientist says. I care about what the actual facts say.
There's facts that the hottest year on record.
So I'll give it happens to be a subject that I have studied quite deeply, and I'll give you hard facts on this without opinions. Are global surface temperatures going up by a little bit? Number one, yes, they are. Number two, is that directly attributable to carbon dioxide? Far more controversial. You can actually look at the... Let me ask you a question. What percentage of the atmosphere do you think is comprised of by carbon dioxide today?
I know that is a non sequitur.
I'm asking a question.
It's a very small percentage. Yes. Nitrogen makes up. We don't breathe nitrogen. Right. I could raise the argument. Why do we need oxygen? Of course we need.
Just for people in the room to know,
still have an impact.
If I may, 0.04% is carbon dioxide today. That is one of the all-time lows in the history of the Earth. And in fact, in most periods where carbon dioxide was a higher percentage of the global atmosphere, you actually had ice ages on Earth. So the idea that carbon dioxide is responsible for this slight increase of global surface temperatures is itself at least questionable. But here's the big question that nobody asks, and we got to get to it. What is our level of confidence that a slight increase in global surface temperatures is on net a bad thing for humanity? It turns out that 8 times as many people die of cold temperatures rather than warm ones every year.
May I say that?
And yet we're obsessing. I'm going to finish this point, then I'll give it right back to you. The best way to prevent all temperature-related deaths is more plentiful, abundant access to fossil fuels. And so the Earth today is actually more covered by green surface area than it was a century ago, because carbon dioxide is plant food, and they tend to grow in slightly warmer conditions. So I think the evidence actually, if you had to pick, is stronger to suggest that on balance, a slight increase in global surface temperatures, which is exactly what we're experiencing, is actually on net a positive for humanity, rather than the thing that's killed more human beings throughout human history, which are global ice ages, which is exactly what they worried about in the 1970s. So on the back of that evidence to say somehow we got to stop burning fossil fuels when actually more people are dying of bad climate change policies than are dying of climate change itself, I think is asinine, and I think it is anti-human, and I think it is going to result in the degradation of the West as we ship those same fossil fuels to places like China in the name of stopping global warming, as the same people who oppose fossil fuels are also opposing nuclear energy, the greatest form of energy production that's carbon-free known to mankind. It doesn't make sense because this is actually a cult, a substitute for a modern religion. And I think the climate change agenda, if it's representative of anything, it has nothing to do with the environment and everything to do with the loss of actually faith and meaning and purpose and actually self-conviction and belief in God in our country. That's actually what I think it's about.
I think that you have taken this question on a completely other like side of the AMOC, in the Atlantic is scientists are now saying that it is struggling and may collapse within the next few years, which will bring cold temperatures to the northern Europe. So as you argued that cold temperatures are worse for humans than warm temperatures, heating up of the Earth will bring warm temperatures to Europe. That will surely degrade the West. I don't see how you're saying that climate change is not real. I mean, like, what?
Climate change is real. It's been real since the start of the Earth. Climate change has existed as long as the Earth has existed. But the idea that we as human beings are contributing to this in a way that's net negative to humanity is a myth. The climate change agenda is a hoax, because it has nothing to do with the climate and everything to do with China actually laughing at every step of the way while we impede ourselves in the West. China burned more coal last year than they've ever burned in the history of their existence as a country. The United States burned less. Are we better off for it? No, we're not. Is the world worse off for it? Yes, we are. Not only because China's catching up to the United States, but actually in the name of this climate agenda, we forget about actually what I think we should care about, which is clean air and clean water, and China's coal is actually far more dirtier for the air than even that which we burn in the United States. So the whole thing fails at every level, and what it is you got a modern Joan of Arc figure, I guess they call her Greta Thunberg, that is offering a substitute for religion that we've lost. And I do think that when you stop believing in your nation, you start pledging allegiance to new movements or flags instead. This is just evidence of a deeper hunger for a cause. Climate change is what we've latched onto, abandoning the facts. And as somebody who majored, I was a molecular biology undergrad at Harvard, I'll tell you a simple rule of thumb to say whether you actually are following science or not. If your conclusion was going to be the same, regardless of what the data tells you, that means you're not actually following science. So that's to say that if they said it was going to be a global catastrophe if global surface temperatures go up, that's a problem. But then they discover the risk might be that global surface temperatures would go down, and that's a problem. It means that the data didn't matter to them in the first place. It was a separate agenda that they were using the data as a smokescreen to push, and that's exactly what's happening with the modern climate agenda.
So climate change is something that Vivek Ramaswamy has talked a lot about, and he's also written extensively about in his books. And I don't know about you guys, but I feel as though most people just don't give a crap about the climate change bullshit anymore, because there are so many more important things happening in the world. For example, the fact that World War III could be starting pretty soon. The US election is a massive deal. Furthermore, everybody kind of sees through the whole World Economic Forum agenda. Greta Thunberg is a super cringe and just unlikable character.
We are in the beginning of a mass extinction.
All of the ridiculous just stop oil protests, throwing things on paintings.
What is worth more, art or life?
I mean, I think that everyone is kind of in agreement now that these people are just insufferable and we just don't care about the issue anymore.
Amid an orange plume, Stonehenge became the latest victim of Just Stop Oil.
Plus, the arguments for it are just so bad, and it's just so obvious that China and India are just laughing at the stupid Western world who are trying to worry so much about climate change while they're just building coal plants like it's going out of fashion. Plus, everybody's terrified to use nuclear, and renewables are just completely inefficient, so I'm sorry. But I no longer care about your arguments about making the sun less hot and making the weather gooder, especially when it drastically increases the cost of living and also just human development. So on to the next question now, which is actually a very smart question.
So my question's about the fertility rate. As of next year, there will be one country in the entirety of this hemisphere that has an above replacement rate fertility rate. It'll be Haiti. We have already run out of European immigrants to accept. We are soon going to run out of Central American immigrants, and after that, we'll run out of Africans. At some point, low-skill immigration labor is not a solution to the fertility crisis. China has a fertility rate of below 1, Korea at 1.3, and the United States at 1.6. The human race is expected to be significantly less populous at the end of the century than it will be than it was at the start. What is a policy solution to that, considering that every economic, social benefit, and worker rights solution that's ever been tried in any country, from Sweden, Switzerland, North Korea, China, the Soviet Union, Nazi Germany, have all failed? How do we get people to have more children?
I mean, I will say that thank you for bringing up a question that is a far greater threat to the future of humanity and the United States of America than climate change ever will be, okay? And it's a hard fact. So you're actually putting your finger on the pulse of something that actually threatens the future of humanity rather than the made-up mythology that we make up. And they kind of work together, actually, because many people are not having children now in the name of worrying about the future of climate change harming humanity, when in fact their decision not to procreate is actually what's giving us the crisis in the first place. So first thing is, outside of government, what you said is what policy solution would work? You actually raise a pretty good point. Policy solutions haven't been great at affecting the fertility rate in Japan, in Singapore. China went the other direction, a folly that's now cost them the status of being the world's most populous country. But I do believe in a cultural change in this country. Right? When you believe in yourself, when you believe in the unit of your family, when you believe in your nation, when you believe that your children are going to grow up in a better country than you do, then people are going to be more likely to have children in that environment. So to the men in this audience, I mean, my best advice to you is get married, have kids, don't think twice about it, and you're actually doing a service to your country and to the future of humanity by doing it. Same advice to the women on the other side of it is that we have too long fallen into the trap of believing that somehow having kids is a trade-off versus doing other valuable things in your life, like having your own independent career that's taken over the mentality of becoming actually hostile to having children, when in fact you're able to do both of those things better if you're bringing more children into the world because you have more skin in the game.
Guys, don't forget to quickly smash that like button if you haven't already. Greatly appreciated. And also, if you're getting value from this, subscribe below. Back to it.
So I'm going to bet on cultural change far sooner than I'm going to bet on policy change. As a matter of policy, we penalize having children in many ways too.
Yeah, we have.
So right now, I got to roll back a lot of those policy changes that penalize the family. And with that, we drive a cultural change that makes us happen. What do you think, Charlie?
There's a couple countries that have reversed it. Poland and Hungary have. Hungary has successfully, with Viktor Orban's program of literally paying people to have kids.
I would point out that the Hungarian reversal is simply a side effect of Soviet birth rate collapse, and that the Hungarian birth rate has started to decline again. Those policies were only
you
temporary.
might be right. I mean, I don't know the details of it.
Well, that's my book, and it's fair, but at least it's better than the other countries.
Absolutely.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, better doing something.
Yeah, you would admit that at least there was an uptick at some point. Yeah, so look, having children is a value, and this is a very important teaching lesson for everyone here, which is if you would have told somebody 300 years ago that having children is not natural to humanity, that given the opportunity that you could exist without having kids, people would think you're nuts. But now that we have the technology to not have kids, but enact the pleasurable act of having kids without having the kids, right? Then having
replacing children with pets,
I'm sorry, what?
For example.
Well, I didn't
replacing children with pets, for example.
Correct.
South Korean child care expenses.
Right. So widespread contraception use, abortion, so on and so forth, has resulted in widespread plummeting birth rates, and children are now looked at as an inconvenience. I'm a father of 2. Vivek's a father of 2.
That's not enough. You're supposed to have 3.
Well, I'm not done.
2.1 is the number.
Man, I've been at this for 2 years. Just we'll meet in 5 years, all right? Let's see what we're doing, okay? So, but let me just say, fair enough. I will say children are a blessing from the Lord. They're not an inconvenience. It's not just a group of germs, not a clump of cells.
That was a great answer.
It's a beautiful thing. And I want to just say, we need to celebrate having children. I think we need to look at public policy proposals that work. But Vivek is right. As long as a culture looks as kids as impediments to your own, wealth and happiness and your own travel schedule and being a CEO of a shoe company, fertility rates are going to keep on going down.
So you guys know that the demographic collapse of birth rates, something that I talk a lot about on this channel, and I think that it is honestly a disaster in the making, and one that the powers that be just don't really seem to give a shit about. I mean, it didn't even really get mentioned in this election cycle. But check out these new charts that just came out this week from the Financial Times that show how the UN's population projection has been consistently way too high. So compare the gentle curves here of the projections with the steep drops in the actual data for many countries. The real data shows dramatic collapse in births. And this is absolutely terrible because with cost of living already very high, it's already very difficult to support yourself. And the social welfare system in countries around the Western world is being strangled. So just imagine when the population pyramid goes from like this, with the old people at the top occupying a smaller space and the young people at the bottom occupying most of the space, to this, with not many young people in the labor force having to support all of these older people. Just imagine what kind of bedlam that will cause. And right now, we are just not addressing it. I mean, if they are addressing it, then they're doing it without telling us by bringing in heaps of illegal immigrants all throughout the Western world to actually manage the labor force. But the ways in which it should be addressed, it's not being addressed. And those ways are cultural incentivization, culturally incentivizing people to have children, positive propaganda about motherhood, about children, about the nuclear family, which the opposite is currently happening, and also political incentivization, policies that allow mothers to stay home, tax cuts for people to be supporting a family, for example, tax cuts per child. If you have 3 children, like in Hungary, then you shouldn't have to pay any tax. People supporting a family shouldn't have to pay tax on overtime. You could also bring in some sort of incentive for grandparents to help look after their grandchildren. I mean, there's many, many things that you could do. But unfortunately, we're literally doing the opposite. There's no cultural incentive to have children and start a family. And also, there's no political incentive. So why are we surprised that the birth rates are literally falling off a cliff? Anyways, that's enough doom for now. Let's get on to the next bit now about the American immigration system.
Welcome to UNC. So I have a genuine question for you. You were quoted saying that people who come to this country as family members are not the meritocratic citizens who should be accepted. I believe you achieved citizenship through your parental ties. Why would you have got the H1B Visa, which 70% of it is given to Indian people? I also believe that your company hired employees on this visa. So why are you turning your back on the Indian community, man?
So I got two answers for you. Thank you for the question. First of all, a lot of the people who have come here through the H1B system would tell you, as I would, that it is just a broken system no matter who you're seeking to serve. For example, you want to talk about special interests and lobbying? This is direct Silicon Valley lobbying that said that if you get your H1B visa and you're hired by one company, you're effectively like a slave. You can't switch to a different company. That's not a free labor market. So there's so much that's broken and bureaucratized. Here's the next question about the H1B visa system is why the heck do we do it on the basis of a lottery when you could actually just select the very best people? So there's a lot that's broken about the administrative state, the bureaucracy. My general approach is when something's broken in government, you can't really fix it when it's lasted that long. You need to shut it down, start with a blank slate, and rebuild from scratch. And that's just a stylistic point that I've applied to this issue as to any other. Let me say a word about immigration policy more generally, though. You could imagine an immigration system that selects for the smartest people to come to the U.S. You could imagine an immigration system that selects for the ones who are going to work the hardest. You could imagine an immigration system that selects for those who love the United States or know the most about the United States or speak the best English. You could imagine any of those, and we could have a debate which of those is the right immigration system to have. Turns out none of those is the quality that our current immigration system rewards. If I have to ask you, it'd be a hard one for you to guess, but I'll give you a chance. What do you believe is the number one human attribute that our current immigration system actually selects for?
This guy next to me just said nationality, but I also just wanted to say really quick.
So I'll give you the answer to the question. I wrote a book about this. It just came out last month. The number one attribute that our current U.S. immigration selects for is your willingness to lie to the U.S. government. Because if you're somebody coming from another country and you say that I can't seek asylum or say I'm seeking asylum because I'm not facing a bodily threat based on my own race or religion, the qualities required for actual seeking asylum, then you don't get in the country. But if you show up at the southern border and check that box as you're instructed to by the cartels, whether or not you're actually facing that level of persecution, you do get into the country. So even drawn out of a hat and picking at random is still better than the system that we have right now. So my view on immigration policy is this. Make it real simple for you guys. Think about your nation like your body. Okay, no migration without consent. Consent should only be granted to migrants who benefit America, and those who enter without consent must be removed and must be punished. And I think that those are three fair principles around which to redesign an immigration system. And number two is important. If there are immigrants who are going to benefit America, I'm obviously partial to that as the kid of legal immigrants to this country. If there are immigrants who are going to benefit the United States of America, that should be the standard that we actually use. It just turns out that's not actually the standard we're using today.
So guys, this is something that I know all too well about, because as somebody who is trying to get a visa to live in the United States at the moment, it is not easy and it is extremely expensive. But if I had the willingness to lie, then I could just walk across the southern border and say that I am seeking asylum and that I am of some sort of risk, and I could just come in. And that process would be way easier than doing all of the paperwork of having to apply for the different kinds of visas and contacting immigration lawyers and accountants. And I mean, it is really, really a difficult process. And I mean, I was on the Whatever podcast a few weeks ago, and there was a Russian girl who was on there who literally told us how she flew to Mexico and crossed the southern border and just claimed asylum.
1 year ago, you came here.
Illegally, without visa. I fly to Mexico.
So you're an illegal immigrant?
I fly to Mexico.
Wait, what?
And then I cross border by my feet with my 8 luggages in my hand and vape here.
So actually, Vivek's totally right. Lying is incentivized. I mean, half the world wants to come to America. So if you really thought about the best interests of the country, and if they were to sharpen their criteria for who comes in, they could bring in some pretty impressive people. But anyways, I digress. On to the next part now, where this student tries to get one on Vivek unsuccessfully.
I have a quick question for Vivek, if that's okay. Could you really quickly just name me the 2 longest rivers in the United States?
We got the Mississippi River, number 1. Number 2?
Missouri.
Well, you think Missouri, I mean, the Rio Grande is not technically in the borders of the United States.
Am I right?
Mississippi and Missouri.
Yes, it would be Mississippi and Missouri. And thank you, Vivek, for answering the question. So the reason why I bring that up is
I love trivia. I can't help myself.
The Rio Grande borders us, so you got to debate there. But I hope that was a productive use of our exchange.
What is the purpose?
I have a question. Yeah. So obviously, while we were running for president, you supported a civics test for 18 to 24-year-olds. The current version of that test, in the citizenship test, asks geography questions. So I'm a full-time student. I really don't have time to study for more exams to earn my right to vote. So I wanted to ask you, why do you believe that we should be able to answer these silly questions to access our constitutional
So the last
rights?
question was about immigration directed at me, and it directly relates to this one. So it turns out that every legal immigrant to this country who becomes a citizen, before they cast a vote, they could have paid millions of dollars in taxes. They could have made all kinds of contributions to this country, started businesses that employed hundreds or thousands of people. But they don't get to vote in this country, and they don't get full citizenship until they do 2 things. One is show that they know some basic facts about the United States of America and how our government works. And number 2 is swear an oath of loyalty to the United States of America. Those are 2 conditions required of any legal immigrant who becomes a citizen. Now, maybe you disagree with that. But my view is if we're going to require that of legal immigrants to this country, as we do, then I think it makes sense for every high school senior who graduates from high school to be able to pass the same civics test required of every legal immigrant to this country, and yes, to swear an oath of allegiance to the United States of America. Because we got a problem in this country. We got a crisis of national pride right now. Less than 16% of Gen Z All right, less than 1 out of 5 of your generation in this room says they're even proud to be an American. We got a 25% recruitment deficit in our own U.S. military. So if I ran as U.S. president as I did to lead this country, I refuse to just sit idly by. Thank you, man. Refuse to sit idly by and just watch that happen, our nation go into this decay of civic self-confidence, and say we're actually going to step up and do something about it. And the least we could do is to demand some skin in the game, that we know the basics about our country before somebody graduates from high school. That's where I'm at on that, and at least at the level of requiring a civics test for every person who graduates from high school, that is something legitimate for every governor to require in their state, and I stand by the policy. Thank you, my man. I appreciate it.
I just have a quick question then. So why stop at 24? Why not that be the case with every citizen in the United States, or why not
so I would
just
do it for everybody. So as a pragmatic matter, I would do it for everybody. I think it should be required for everybody for a condition for full citizenship. The difficulty comes with some practical implementation, but I'm with you on the principle there. The practical implementation is when somebody's been voting for 40 years and then you say, I'm going to take away from something from you that you've already done. That makes it a lot more difficult to implement than to say somebody's already in school, so we can implement civic education into high school. Make it easier for our high school young people in this country to know more about our country by replacing DEI indoctrination with actual civic education, which we're not doing in this country. But while people are in school, you have a chance to start with a fresh slate that you probably can't do with somebody who's already 62 years old. So as a practical implementation, at least I would start with that. But if I could have it my way, would we do it for everybody? You're darn right we would.
So this student really did something there. He really thought Vivek was not going to be able to answer this question, but he was wrong. I mean, if you want to come at Vivek with some trivia, you best come correct. And also, if you can't study hard enough to pass a basic civics test of the country that you live in, then you definitely should not be able to vote. Period. What a terrible argument. I mean, imagine having no skin in the game, being a college student, and also saying that you should have the right to vote, but you don't have time to study for a civics test. Give me a break.
Why do you believe that we should be able to answer these silly questions?
I mean, if you're a 19-year-old who has never run a business, never been out in the corporate world, you don't really know how the country works, and you don't know the basic functions of government, then you have absolutely no right to negate the vote of a 50-year-old who does. And I know that a lot of people think that voting is some sort of God-given, immutable, natural right, but I just totally disagree with that. I think that substantially less people should vote. And I've thought about this a lot, and I just can't think of one good reason why somebody who is a 19-year-old retard who has never done anything should be able to cancel out the vote of someone in their 50s who has been a landlord, a business owner, has a bit more wisdom, understands the country.
You f***ing fascist! Shame!
And I mean, if you guys want to give a justification in the comments, go for it, but not just because they're a citizen or because they pay taxes, because a lot of the time these people are tax burdens when they're in college, etc. An actual justification, I would love to hear one. So let me know below.
As a proud American college student and a child of South Korean immigrants, I'm particularly invested in our country's immigration policy. So one of the reasons that I've decided not to vote for Trump this year is because he had said verbatim, quote, "What I want to do and what I will do is if you graduate from a college, I think you should get automatically as part of your diploma a green card to be able to stay in this country. And that includes junior colleges too." This is not an offhand remark. He's doubled down on this policy repeatedly at his rallies, in interviews, and on Truth Social in June, August, and again 3 weeks ago. He's basically saying that green cards, which is permanent residency, should be automatic for all college graduates with no vetting and given even for 2-year degrees, so not just for highly skilled workers. That's a radically open immigration policy. This is often justified by saying that we need the best and brightest from the world, but it effectively decreases wages for American workers and massively increases competition for jobs and housing. Basically, he's promising as many green cards as colleges will accept foreign students, while F1 OPT workers don't even pay Social Security or Medicare taxes on their wages. And this cheaper immigrant labor only serves the Wall Street and Silicon Valley billionaires that are funding Trump's campaign this year, and the universities that are happy to accept tuition from rich foreigners, not American students that take out hefty loans for college and then cannot find a STEM job. There's already over 1 million foreign students in America, and there will be many more under Trump. I don't want us to become like Australia, where 3 to 4% of their entire population is students, mostly from China or India.
Yeah,
Mr.
so
Kirk,
just-
wait, last thing, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Mr. Kirk, I know that your stance on this topic has changed in the past. I've heard you shine light on your platform about over 20 million Americans, college students, set to enter the worst job market in American history. I've heard you mention correctly that over 15% of our nation is now foreign-born. I've heard you call for a temporary stop to all visas. So how do you reconcile your perspective with Trump's policies? In short, why should we expect mass immigration to go down under Trump? Because frankly, I have no reason to expect that.
That was an interesting speech. Thank you. First of all, that's not Trump's current position. He has clarified that, just so we're clear. So he has clarified that that is not his current position. It would be merit-based, and not every single graduate would get a green card. But I would just be imagining... Plenty of times, many times in the past couple months. I encourage you to look at it. But I do have a question. You say you're not voting for Trump, so you're not voting for Kamala. There's no way, right?
I'm not voting this year.
But so that's interesting. You say you don't want America to become like Australia. If a lot of people don't vote, therefore Kamala wins, don't you think that would make us closer to Australia?
No, not necessarily. I haven't heard Kamala espouse this green card stapled to
Oh no,
diplomacy
it's
policy.
complete open borders. Like, I mean, it
Well,
is.
on
it's
the open borders topic, well, that's actually really interesting that you bring that up because Trump himself didn't affirm this policy in 2016.
Wait, hold on. I just want to be clear. Like, you think Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are in the same galaxy on immigration?
I like Trump's rhetoric on immigration much more. I do. But I don't
But when he was president, hold on, we had the lowest ever border crossings. We had a moratorium on immigration from like 30 different countries. We had wages go up for native-born Americans. I mean, the numbers are themselves.
We did have record high illegal immigration crossings.
Well, actually, no, we didn't. It went down to record low, and right now we have record high illegal immigration crossings under Biden and Harris.
That's true.
But, so yeah, I just want to be clear, though. But you just said it wasn't true, like 10 seconds ago.
No. It's true that it was a record at the time, but
okay.
it's not. It's now a new record.
Okay, so, but I just want to be very clear, though, that this is more directed at you, and because you had a nice little soliloquy there, and it's just this. You staying at home will hand the keys to the kingdom to someone that will destroy this country. And so if you actually had the objections and that wasn't some prepared speech that someone gave you, you would be crawling over grass or glass or both to go vote for Trump because he's someone that is a much better fit for your worldview. See, Donald Trump not only is better in immigration, but I'm sure that you're better fit with him for many other issues. But not voting at all, that all it does is it makes you feel good while your country burns, the country that your parents immigrated to try to make sure that you had a future. It does no good except it makes some point here at an event.
I appreciate that remark, and I do like his rhetoric on immigration more, but legal immigrations, the 85,000 H1C visas were capped out every year of Trump's first presidency. Legal immigration, mass legal immigration stayed at an all-time high.
That's fine. I have a question. Do you think the Trump presidency or the Biden-Harris presidency, which one was better for America? Generally, all issues.
The first Trump term was better.
So then why wouldn't the second Trump term be better than a Kamala term?
Because he's changed his tune on a lot of policies and accepted a lot of funding that I don't think is sketchy.
First of all, it's not true, but shouldn't you say, okay,
well, in 2016, he was against H1B.
Everything in life is a lesser of two evils. You're not voting for a perfect candidate. Right now, you have a binary choice. You have Donald Trump, who was an excellent president. You have Jezebel, who's been a terrible vice president. Which obviously, one is going to be better than the other. One will secure the border, prevent World War III. You'll have a better home. You want to be able to own a home, right? You want to be able to have wages go up, obviously. Or you could just give the keys to the king to Kamala Harris, be a rent the rest of your life. Think about it, and I encourage you.
My last remark is my concern is that a Trump presidency would quell the dissidence and the dissatisfaction that's been found in the last 4 years while not fixing our problems simultaneously.
Well, I'll just give you one final case on that.
If we have a country, if Kamala wins, your arguments
I think just to pick up on that last point, you could just change the whole topic to the last point you made. Under whose presidency are you more likely to actually even be able to be a dissident? Right? On one hand, you have a regime that's been in charge that says we're going to censor you on social media. You say the wrong thing about where the pandemic began. You say the wrong thing about the Hunter Biden laptop story. You put an American flag on your profile. You're often targeted for further scrutiny. That's not America. So if your top concern is your ability to be an effective dissident from the right, from the left, or whatever, I think this election clearly is about censorship on one side versus free speech on the other. And the fact of the matter is, I think your view that you just expressed here might be pretty high on the Kamala Harris administration list of views that need to actually be silenced by the time she's in charge. So Forget about the actual policy. Even your ability to express it is what I think is on the ballot this time around. And I encourage you to think about it that way.
So this whole one issue voting thing for Republicans, which you see quite a lot these days, is for me just a losing issue, because when you talk to the Democrats, as I have done, talk to Democratic voters, the reason why they're voting for Kamala Harris is normally they don't have a reason. Normally they don't know. But if they do have a reason, it's normally one of two or three things. It's either because she's a woman, because she's black, which she's not, by the way, or because she's not Donald Trump. And obviously abortion as well, but that comes in with the woman thing. And whilst it's important to be steadfast in your views and to campaign for your views, no one issue is important enough to risk Kamala Harris becoming president. Because as far as I can see, from the issues of abortion to immigration to war with Iran, however much you don't agree with Donald Trump's position, she and the Democrats will be way worse. So anyways, on to the last bit now where Charlie is pressed about abortion.
Mr. Kirk, I have a question for you regarding a past thing you said about abortion. So in a previous conversation you had, you said that if you're in a hypothetical situation, if your 10-year-old daughter was raped,
I've only answered this question 3 times today, but yeah. So I'll tell you exactly what I said. Yes, my family, if my daughter were to be raped, we would not be comfortable if my daughter would have a pregnancy without complications, murdering an unborn child. That is the values of our family, correct. So I have a question for you. Somebody in this audience was conceived in rape. Can you tell me who?
How am I supposed to know that?
Exactly, because human rights apply to all humans regardless of how they're conceived. Secondly,
let me tell you something.
Secondly, I have an ultrasound in front of me. One is a baby conceived in rape, one is a baby conceived in a loving relationship. Which one is which?
Repeat that again. Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
There's 2 ultrasounds. On one screen is a baby that was conceived in rape. The other ultrasound is a baby conceived in a loving, monogamous relationship. Which one is which?
Well, it depends when we're looking at the ultrasound, because I would note it as a fetus rather than a baby. So...
Well, hold on, no. But you can't tell the difference between the two. The point being is that universal human rights apply to all people regardless of the method of conception, correct? Now, of course, we acknowledge that rape is terrible and awful, but when in life is doing something evil after an evil act permissible, acceptable, or okay?
So it's not evil because it's not murder, first of all.
Okay, no, that's fine. That's where we disagree. So you asked my personal position. It's very clear that abortion is murder. We could discuss that and debate it. But my position is not unreasonable if you were to believe that killing an unborn baby is murder, which I do, and our family does. And that's the position of our family. Now, I would ask you, since it is not it's a fetus, what species is the fetus?
It is a Homo sapien species.
Got it. So
correct.
It's a human.
But
Then therefore, shouldn't it get human rights if it's a human?
Well, I think human rights apply to personhood. And
got it. So when does it become a human worthy of rights? Tell me the moment, the time, and the second.
I would say at about 16 to 18 weeks.
Oh, so that's a range. You got to be more specific, because human rights are pretty important. You got to give me like a specific time.
Okay, I would say just 18 weeks of gestation.
Why there? Why not 10 weeks?
Because that's when complex brainwave activity
Okay, actually,
forms.
brainwaves start at 8 weeks, but let me be very clear. Why is it that brain activity is equal to moral worth? When someone is quote-unquote brain dead, which we don't even understand where consciousness resides, we know so little about the brain that neuroscientists can't even tell you where your own thoughts occur in the brain, that when someone is quote-unquote brain dead, do you know that women still have periods when they're brain dead? Do you know that when you cut someone who is quote-unquote brain dead, their adrenaline was spiked? Do you know that when someone's quote-unquote brain dead and a loved one comes in, their heart rate increases? So someone that is brain dead is still very much alive. In fact, we have hundreds of documented examples of people that were called brain dead by hospitals and doctors that quote-unquote come back to full brain activity. And the difference is when you have a baby that is unborn, has brainwaves at 8 weeks, uninterrupted and absent intervention, those brainwaves will develop into a complete and fully developed human being as you and I are. So it's not the same thing, but why is brainwaves moral worth?
Well, I describe moral worth as like relation to consciousness. And consciousness begins at about 20-ish weeks. That's when it first appears. Because that's when complex brainwave activity starts. You say at 8 weeks that brainwave activity occurs, which is true. That is true. But I'm speaking more just mainly sorry.
Yeah, so we just have a disagreement here.
And let me intervene. I'm not 100% sure we're going to leave with a disagreement. Let's test this out. So I'll give you a true case. All right, it's a real case. Clarence Thomas spoke about it from the bench and the hearing of the Dobbs case. Walk through it with us. There's a pregnant woman who's walking down the street. She's assaulted, physically. The unborn child dies as a result of the assault. Do you believe that that criminal deserves some liability for that death?
That's a very good question. I get the crowd wants to react.
So you think that guy should walk away scot-free, or do you think he deserves liability for the death of that unborn child?
I deserve he does, but that
So
still...
so let me just pause right there. He does deserve liability for the death of that unborn child, which suggests that you may not disagree as much as you think you do.
It's a human life then. If you deserve liability for it, then you killed the human life.
I mean, I still separate murder from abortion, so it's not, I don't agree.
Well, hold on a second. But again, you could keep saying that, but the only way that the abortionist argument works is if you have a moral dimension for people that are outside the womb and a different moral dimension for people inside the womb. Those of us who are pro-life believe that morality transcends your size, location, environment, or degree dependency. Just because you're smaller and developing within utero doesn't mean you have a different moral framework that is applied to you. That you have universal human morality regardless of how small you are. And we don't have to agree on that, but that's the pro-life position. The pro-abortion position, you have to constantly be doing contortionist arguments. Well, it's the mom's body. Well, actually, it's two bodies because you have two sets of DNA. Well, it's in the mom. Well, okay, do people in Cincinnati get less human rights than people in Raleigh? Of course not. Oh, well, it's really small. Well, I'm 6'5", so everyone smaller than me gets less human rights? No, of course not. The moral standards that the abortionists will use on any of their arguments are carve-outs and exceptions because it's really hard to confront the truth of abortion, which is the murder and the slaughter of unborn children that did nothing wrong except want a place in this world.
I mean, your argument is... I don't disagree completely with your argument because I know it comes from religion as well. I know that you have
and also about common sense and biology. Let me ask two more clarifying questions. We might have agreement. Currently in America, this is legal, but and in Iceland, it is not just legal, it's the law. If a woman finds out that she has a baby with Down syndrome, should she be allowed to abort that baby based on that information?
No.
Okay, we agree. You and I, that's a pro-life argument, by the way. Secondly, if a woman finds out she's having a girl and the couple wants a boy, should you be able to have sex-selective abortion?
No.
Okay, we agree, and that's a big deal because both those things right now are where this entire conversation is heading. And that's important because right now, abortion is being considered birth control when it used to be safe, legal, and rare, and now it's abundant and public and taxpayer subsidized. So we're actually not that far off on this topic.
And let me just ask you one question, more university educational matter about history here. How familiar are you with the founding of Planned Parenthood as an organization? Do you know much about its history or its purpose when it was founded?
I don't know much about it. I looked into it a while ago. I don't remember anything off the top of my head.
Fair enough. And I just think it's worth understanding his. You have no reason to have to be educated on this, but Margaret Sanger was a co-founder of Planned Parenthood. And this is relevant because Kamala Harris is now on one hand courting the black community, talking about reproductive rights, when the whole project was actually started to stop the reproduction of African Americans in the United States of America. That's the ugly, sordid history of how the pro-abortion agenda expanded politically in the U.S. And so I just think it's also worth tracing. I know that's not directly responsive to the really scientifically, grounded or attempted the exchange you all had. But I do think that it is worth keeping in mind the political backdrop. It does irk me a little bit when I see a presidential candidate talk about reproductive rights, say I care about the future of the black community, and I also think that those two things have been deeply in tension with one another because the whole project was about preventing the depopulation of certain kinds of people in America. And sadly, that's exactly the effect that it's also had, pertaining to also the fertility crisis that was the subject of an earlier question too. So we got to look at these things as a whole. And I would just encourage you to look at, these logical puzzles around philosophical dilemmas can get you so far, but sometimes when you see it through the historical context, you see things a little bit differently on the other side of it too. Thank you for the question.
So really solid defense of the unborn there by Charlie. A few good arguments in there. I mean, Charlie is never far away from an abortion argument. For some reason, at these little Q&As and everything, they always just come at him with the abortion arguments, which is why he's refined it and he's got it on point. So with that, guys, I will stop rambling. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like the video, smash that subscribe button as well if you have not already. Also, if you'd like to find me on Instagram and Twitter, Jake RattlesnakeTV, and if you'd like to watch another one, right here. Till next time, I'm Jake. This is Rattlesnake TV, keeping you armed and dangerous.